So, what do you think about NGOs in Seychelles? Because you volunteered on quite a few different NGOs, correct?
Yeah, so Global Shapers is a youth-led and managed NGO. It's completely youth, so 18 to 30.
Yeah.
And my experiences there, like, we have we have a strong sense of like we cannot mess this up.
Yeah.
For the behalf of young people, young people have to prove themselves, and I'm not saying there's no proper reasons why those things exist, but we do feel a certain sense that if we don't have an accounts in order, if we don't have transparency and accountability amongst ourselves, the trust is gone. And I think that's the Seychelles that we live in, that there's been a lot of, whether truth or not, but a lot of issues around corruption and unaccountability. And so in my experience with somewhere like the Hub, I've realized how it's hard to always be accountable, but it's necessary to be accountable. And you go through 15 steps instead of the one step that makes life easier. So in terms of NGOs in Seychelles, I've heard many things. And I think, people being able to take grants and pay themselves quite a large sum out of that is something I've definitely come across. Have I got the evidence to back that up? No. But it's something that it's interesting because we're such a small community, and within communities, whether it's environment or whether it's another sector, people talk.
Yeah. Things get around. I have to say, I do hear quite negative things about a few NGOs using conservation as an umbrella to basically just run a business. And I know a few people who have been dragged into fraud, and they have reported that said NGOs and nothing has happened. How hard is it to actually push some kind of movement or create awareness around that, or actually
hold them accountable?
How do you hold them accountable?
So I mean, it's always about where these funds come from, and knowing that if a donor's aware of this or not. I think that's key, because the donor should be able to ask, for audit, any kind of report needed from this to say, okay, you had X amount of funds and they went to what. If the donor is aware that maybe someone's paying themselves too much, then it's on to the donor to say that's possible, not possible. And maybe as us, as a community, we can say, look, that doesn't make sense to us. Maybe that's a discussion of a specific donor saying, well, does that still make sense? And then they need to justify that. It kind of, in terms of conservation and environment being used as a tool, we talk about greenwashing, but I see politicians, past and present, it's a very trendy thing to have, and it takes away from maybe corruption that's been, I've seen, politicians, especially in Seychelles, and you look at the former regime, we have very strong conservation legacy, but then when you've seen what's happened in terms of human rights abuses, in terms of corruption, this allowed a lot of distraction from certain things. It lessened that blow in that sense, right? And I think that's something we have to be aware of as we go forward. And I don't know, for me, one of the biggest issues, and I think when we think about like the Ensemble project, where we both were not happy to see that go ahead because of the lack of consultation with the community in the second phase. You have to ask yourself these environmental impact assessments and the consultants taking part in those. I think that's also a big part of it, because you see there's a lot of money in this space, whether it's from a hotel development, whether it's for a grant being carried out, and you have to ask yourself, what is the motivation for someone to be part of this? Are they actually here for the conservation, for the sustainability, or are they here to enrich themselves? And I think that's something that maybe, that again, discussions with donors, discussion with the government, and not just discussions, but actually like, we've seen this happen X amount of times, we're not allowing this to happen again.